Okay, next up, that was really interesting because Oracle is the biggest, as you know, but in the end, it felt very startup-y, right? It felt like a lot of opportunities for the little ones that are just coming up, and that is something magical about the API community. Next up, let's bring Div to the stage. The API narrative, a true story of APIs and I love a tech story coming, so that looks great, and your background is super fun.
Thanks, Jennifer. My pleasure to be here. Hi, everyone.
Do you want to share your slides, and how are you doing today, Div?
I'm doing wonderful. It's 8 a.m. in the morning in the East Coast here in the United States, but it's a pleasure to be here as part of API Days Paris.
Well, I hope you are starting a wonderful day with us. And hey, audience, help her start a nice day, but asking questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. So first and foremost to API Days, a big thank you. This is the last of the API Days showcase that I've had over this past year. Started with API Days New York, then Hong Kong, Australia, and now Paris. And I just want to say a big thank you because just sitting in my studio here, I wouldn't have thought that would have happened, but I'm here and I'm looking forward to sharing my story with all of you. So first and foremost, why me and why API Days? So I always think about APIs as a world where business and IT start speaking the same language, where we have shared OKRs and we're all thinking about business influence and impact. And even the story that Louis just shared with APIs and hospitality, you can see so many synergies where it doesn't matter whether you're a big company or a small company, you can bring those together with the magic of APIs. And so here today, I would like to wake up every morning and get inspired by the power of APIs. And if we could tell the world the same narrative, whether it's all the way from API design to API lifecycle management, that's what I'm here to share today. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I joined the API movement as a product marketing manager for API management at Boomi in 2016. And in 2020, I started being a part of the Women in APIs initiative to bring diversity, inclusion, and belonging around the world. So step in, take a seat, have your favorite drink in hand, and let's get started. So today I'm going to cover a couple topics, a little bit about me, talk a little bit about what API is in a business context, and give you a perspective of where is the rise of the API economy? What does digital transformation, the buzzword in the business, mean? What are some of the trends that I've seen? And then wrap it up with women in APIs. And let's kick it right away. So a little bit about me. My name is Div Manickam. I have 3 life values that I had put together when we were bringing together a team and a product group together about 5 years ago. And now that's become my life values. If you see the photos in here, I love photography. That's one thing that always lights me up every time that I see. You'll see my travel wall behind me. And if you can zoom in, you'll see Paris right in the center. I was fortunate to actually visit Paris in 2016 as part of my 10 countries, 20 cities trip in 2016. And I think that has probably changed my life for real. If you see the photo in the middle with all the ducks rowing in the same direction, there's one duck that's rowing in the opposite direction. And I like to think of myself like that. I always challenge the status quo. And if you give me something and say, hey, here is the recipe, follow it to the T, you can never get me to do that because I always try to find ingredients to mix it in. And this morning, I actually made a pumpkin drink with pumpkin puree, lavender, and maple syrup. And I was like, oh, this actually tasted good. So I try to find different ways to bring things together. Most recently, I have embarked on a journey with stress, anxiety, mindfulness, essentialism, diversity, and belonging. And I'm super excited to actually self-publish my first book on December 21st this year. It's about my journey through stress and anxiety and how I'm navigating through it. It's one day is a good day, the other day might not be. And I wanted to share my story because I have seen the power of communities coming together and helping each other. And that's a little bit about me. And when I think about why APIs and why I've gone down this path, there were two quotes that always stuck with me. The first is, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough, by Albert Einstein. And the second is, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And the photo that you're seeing in the background was one of the photos that I got to take. I would call it as an impeccable timing, because I was right there when the sunset was happening, and the colors of pink, blue, and everything in between coming together was probably the most beautiful thing. And so when I took on this path of finding simplicity in everything that I'm doing, I wanted to take that same approach for APIs. And so let's step in to understand what is an API. And so when my first experience explaining what APIs are to my business counterparts and to folks in sales was trying to explain it to them with something that's common knowledge. So I tried to use an analogy of a menu. And I said, hey, everybody loves food, so let's connect over food and talk through what an API means. And the example that I'd given them was, think of APIs as a menu. You have a menu with a list of dishes. Someone's ordering one of those dishes. You might have your own favorite orders in there. And then the restaurant does what they do best. They go cook, make the best meal for you, and then you get your dish, right? So I think about APIs in that same analogy. I saw this example and I was like, yes, this is the perfect example. Let me use this example. And I had to share this story at our sales kickoff. And this was probably the most nerve-wracking thing that I had to do, because I had just joined the company and it was about 6 months, not even 6 months into the role. And I was like, wait, they want to hear from me about APIs? I just started the role. How can I teach you? And one of the best responses that I got was, this was the first time I understood what an API is, and I could actually tell this to somebody else. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm doing something right. So let's keep going. And so that's why I think when you think about APIs, and I like to say that, hey, it's APIs, not IPA. But if you love an IPA, then you'll always remember an API. And this was, I think, one of the key drivers why you're starting to see more and more of businesses starting to trying to understand what APIs are. And I think that evolution started happening primarily because before we always talked about products, and now we are starting to talk about platforms. And I think that is the key driver why APIs are getting all the attention it is today. So what I'm starting to see is we have APIs everywhere, whether you know it or not. If you take a look at your smartphone, you see some of them in action, whether you're looking at searching your weather, right? Every morning I wake up and I'm like, hey, what's the weather today? I think today it's like somewhere in the 30s, 30 Fahrenheit. I can never do the conversion. So you can do the math or just ask Google or Alexa to give you the number. You place an order. Most of us, we had our Black Friday and Thanksgiving a couple weeks ago, and everyone was shopping online, or they were shopping online and picking up in store, right? You place your orders for an Uber ride, whether you're checking your bank balance, whether you're checking, is there payments that need to be made? All of this is being powered by APIs, and that little thing called the API is doing a lot behind the scenes, whether we realize it or not. So I have a question just to open it up to folks who are on the call listening to this presentation today. Tell me where you're joining in from, and is there a favorite API of yours that you go to whenever you're working on API design or API management? And if there is one, I would love to see it in the comments as we wrap up the session in a couple more slides. So let me switch over to the rise of API economy. And this is where I like to think of the shift and the change. And think about the traditional, when we think about an API provider and an API consumer. And this was a beautifully written article that I read from Rakuten talking about the evolution of APIs. And they talk about SaaS into XaaS, right? It's everything as a service. Now, businesses find that as the buzzword of the universe. Everything as a service is where we want to go. We want to convert every product, every data entry point that's out there to make it more accessible, is how I would like to think of it. So you can actually have APIs that are feeding and analyzing data. You can have APIs that are an extension to a business process. There are different ways of enhancing it, right? You have some backend operation that's happening, and there are heavy duty integrations that's happening. There are workflows that you're building, and then it goes to that API consumer. So take the example of, we were talking about the weather API, where the information is being corralled through different forecasting sites, and every information is coming together. And then me as the consumer or the developer, for that example, is taking that information and then making it more presentable to the user. So me as the user, the only information I want to know is what's the temperature right now, and is it going to rain or is it going to snow? So that kind of level of information and distilling it to that simplicity factor, I think, is what's made it much more accessible for folks. And then the last piece, that when I think about the rise of the API economy, is you have made the entire operational and service aspects of the business right where you need it to be. So there are APIs that are capable of making decisions on behalf of the user. Think of taking away the form factor. So if you think of how we have voice assistants now, where I'm not even typing information or asking questions. I'm just saying, hey, what's the weather today? And I'm getting that information, just the right information that I need, not 10 pages of documents that I need to corral through, right? So that I think makes a big change. The other aspect that I've seen, and this is where I think we're starting to see a new dimension of user and developer experience that are being driven by APIs. So if I look at what's the future of APIs, and I'm going to bring this in the lens of a business user, because that is where I am and who I am. So if we look at what does it mean for the advancement of APIs, if we start seeing more newer API trends or use cases, then you'll start seeing more business models emerge from this. I'm going to walk through the 6 examples that Rakuten actually shared, and then also give you an example how we looked at it at Boomi when we were talking about API mediation and open banking and the API economy itself. So I'll go from the right to the left. So when we looked at it in Boomi, we said, hey, we have our banking services as part of the open banking initiative. PSD2 was the initiative at that point in time. And we were talking about how API economy is going to drive it. And we said, hey, API mediation is what's driving a big part of it. So you have the ability to create, publish, and manage APIs. And then we started seeing a proliferation of vendors and companies that are driving this initiative, Boomi being one of them, to actually make that happen. And now you also saw so many examples of companies, even within API Days, that are actually advocating for this. And then we said, okay, let's actually bring that one more level up to what does it mean for the customer experience? So whether it's online banking, whether it's mobile banking app, a fintech app, or any third-party partner app, how are we going to build those connections and build those integrations in there? So that's the key element that we were looking at. But if you fast forward and think about what's the future of APIs, you are doing a couple of things. The first is better API experience on mobile devices. So if I have an underlying technology or underlying transmission of that information, how am I making sure that app developers have the right information at the right point in time? And also making it easier for them to actually build apps and get it out into the market quickly. That I think is a key aspect. The second was new business models. So we are starting to see more and more with all of our event-driven APIs that you're starting to see API providers playing an active role to serve the API consumers. And you're also seeing that shift, whether you take an example of when you schedule a trip on Uber, the app is automatically doing all the magic behind the scenes, from finding your location to finding the driver that is closest to you, giving you the information of how long it's going to take for that car to show up, and give you all of that information, which is event-driven API, making those decisions on your behalf. And then you also have standardization of APIs. So how can you bring concepts like an open API initiative and actually make sure that APIs are being defined and they're interoperable in a standardized way. The fourth piece was about microservices. And I remember when we were working on microservices for delivering APIs, this was the buzzword of the century at that time, when we talked about how we are starting to see all these changes happen. And we wanted to make it more modular, where it's all about bringing frameworks being developed and actually making it more portable across the board. And then the fifth piece was around API-driven architecture for end-user apps. And if you think of it, today, I think we all say this, there is an app for that, right? If somebody asks, hey, I have this problem I'm trying to solve, someone out there will say, there's an app for that. Just go search for it and you'll find it. And so we've started seeing developers building and hosting APIs where they're actually bringing the architecture and making it much more easier for us to leverage it. So now maybe we might change the story to say, actually, there's an API for that. And that, I think, will be a big transformation that we could see. But as a business user and as a business executive, for me, the sixth one is probably the most important. APIs as information superhighways for enterprises. And this doesn't happen overnight, right? Companies, organizations, everybody realizes that we need to break down the data silos. We need to make information sharing more accessible in a more seamless way. And for us to do that, you need these pathways to access the data. And that's where I think APIs acting as those information superhighways have become the underlying foundation for everything that I would see as the future of APIs coming together. So now that we've talked a little bit about APIs, let me dive into digital transformation and why API trends have become more and more relevant. And I think 2020, if it has taught us anything, is if we put our minds and hearts to it, anything is possible. And I think we were all forced to take away whatever we had as physical touch points, right? I think Luis also shared this, where he said, hey, I would love to be in a conference in person in 2022. And as much as we see that, we have also seen how we've seen shifts happen. We've seen how we have taken a concept of, I would always go to the store and try on new clothes and then pick it up. But now I can actually order the items that I want and actually just go. There's curbside pickup. I had a chance to go to Chicago this year, and I went to the Uniqlo store, and I was amazed how they transformed the whole shopping experience. So now, once I pick up all the clothes that I want to buy, I go into the checkout area, and they have a bin. It's a box, and I just keep the items there, and it automatically detects what items I have, and it gives me, like in literally 2 seconds, it gives me, hey, here is the amount you need to pay. And I was amazed at first. I was like, wait, what just happened? Like the whole experience that I had of going to the checkout, talking to the cashier, and actually having a conversation is gone. It's just this box that's giving me within 2 seconds. It doesn't matter whether I have 2 items or 30 items, it's going to process all of that information because there were tags that it is detecting. Now that changed how I looked at things. And I was like, if we can do something like that with something as traditional as the shopping experience, we can change how we look at any large scale change. And I think over the next couple of years, we're going to see more and more of bringing modularity in place. And this is something that in 2018, Forrester had conducted a research where they called it the sorry state of digital transformation. As much as it was relevant in 2018, I think it is still relevant in 2021, and it will continue to be relevant in 2022. And they asked this question, where do you think your digital transformation is for your firm? And about 50% said, hey, we're working on it, we're still going through. And then there were these 21% on the other end that said, hey, it's complete, we're done, our transformation is done. And what I would like to encourage every company to think of is, your transformation is never done, because it's not an end state. And sometimes we view APIs as a means to an end, but the reality is that you as an organization should be thinking of, how do they fit in your overall strategy, whether it's growing your business, whether it's scaling your application development. And you need to think of, how can you scale and secure your business with that enterprise-wide strategy? And so I think that's where when Tad Stadler shared this in 2018. It made it important because digital transformation is hard, in part because we still have a lot to learn what it is about and how to accomplish it, right? And so that, I think, is a big aspect of it. When I looked at this other question that they asked, they were like, hey, so we know digital transformation is important. Everybody wants to be digitally transformed. And I think 2020, 2021, everyone was on the race to how to get there. Now we know that's the goal. And so there was a question that was asked by the Digital Process Automation Survey by Forrester in 2018, where they said, what's the primary focus of these process improvement efforts? Everybody wants to do process improvements. And if you see in this chart, you'll notice that in the beginning, cost reduction about 2 years before was key. And then you started seeing that cost reduction didn't really matter anymore. It was not much about the savings. We saw that worker productivity, customer experience, regulatory compliance, all of these things moved up and down. So at times they were important, at times they were not. But the big one that actually rose was accelerating digital business transformation. And I think if you see that, so if you look at this, it said 49% in 2020, that number is probably rising for good. And it has a specific reason. And the reason is this: whether you have your customer journey, and Louis was talking about the hospitality customer journey, right? I as a customer, have a set number of expectations. As we became smarter consumers, we also started expecting more and more from our businesses. And it didn't matter whether you were an enterprise company or whether you were in the financial services industry or whether you are in the hospitality industry, education, everything got disrupted in the past year. And we started asking those questions: what does the customer journey look like, and how can I make change there? And this, I think, is bringing that fragmented data, and organizations are what's impeding in customer journeys. And so we started piecing those things together to understand, what does it mean for a customer? What does that cycle look like? And how can I bring change for them? And this is where, when I look at the 2021 trends for API-powered digital transformation, when you look at what's coming in 2022, this was a really good article from Google Cloud API Management that talked about these 5 trends. You're going to start seeing more increased SaaS and hybrid cloud API deployments. And this is not just saying that that's the direction that we're going, it's to give you that framework. You're going to start seeing more analytics that is driving this initiative. You're going to see more of AI and ML powered APIs. There is going to be an emphasis on API ecosystems, right? It's not just about the economy anymore, it's ecosystems that you're building, and those are going to be the innovation drivers. And last but not least, never forget about API security and governance, because that's more important than ever before. And I think it's going to drive more and more focus going forward. And if you look at the charts on the right, you'll start seeing that organizations are making that shift, whether it's how they're consuming their digital transformation, how they're continuing to do it through the pandemic, or how they're going to disrupt where they are today. And so when I look at those aspects, this is where I think we, as the stakeholders for the API economy, have a role to play. When we started looking at how Gartner was viewing the hybrid integrations and how we are starting to see different players in the market, this was how it was defined. You have integration specialists who were focused on bulk data processing or enterprise services. If you had one of those, then you probably had 10 ad hoc integrators. These are like the line of business teams that are coming together. They were interested in app development or API development. And then you started seeing 100 of these citizen integrators, the business users, if you will. Those have personal projects, those are working with data synchronization and spreadsheets. And then there's this new ecosystem that's coming together, and we don't even know how to predict what that number is going to look like, which are the digital integrators, the AI, ML technologies that are helping out there. There is automation, deep learning, all of the conversational UI, UX that we talk about, all of that's driving. And I think the one that I'm most proud of is this data point from Slashdata, where they looked at the developer economics for 2021 and found that over the past 2 years, the female developer population actually doubled. And being part of that ecosystem, I think I take great pride in knowing that we are making a change in how we are bringing diversity and inclusion into the ecosystem. So what I would love to encourage every one of us is to build the next evolution of APIs together. And to do so, there are organizations that are there that are helping us strive further into that equation. So being a member of the Women in APIs community over this past year, even though we were all restricted in terms of meeting each other in person, I think technology has served as well to build those connections and actually help kind of build those ecosystems together and build a community. Because the reality is the future of APIs is evolving, and we know that there's a need for better balance to make sure there is better and even maybe best ethical social solutions out there. To get the better balance, we need to attract and retain more women in the industry. And I think Women and APIs is doing a fantastic job of building that community initiative, of taking action for this. There are amazing programs like the networking events that we have, peer-to-peer speaking facilitation program that I've been leading, which I've had an opportunity to get to know some amazing women out there that are in the API ecosystem. And so I would encourage folks, if you know someone that you think might benefit from it, definitely give them this information and let them know that this is an area for them to look at. If you're wondering, how can I get this information? You can find out more about joining and learning what's coming up at apidoes.global. And last but not least, I had seen this information in a totally different landscape at the WordPress conference that happened earlier in this year. And Leo Gopal was talking about API. And since I was so trained in APIs, I was like, wait, why is he talking about APIs? This is the WordFest conference. And he said, think about API as assume positive intent. So the next time you're having a conversation, whether you're on the technical side or the business side, assume positive intent, because we are all trying to make magic happen and make reality happen for our companies, for our teams, and we want to do the right thing. So assume positive intent, and I wish you all the very best. This has been an honor and a privilege to be part of this team here. And so thank you all, and I'll pass it back to Jennifer. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you so much. Oh, I could at least go like this. But I had some technical difficulties because, live. I really appreciated that. And I really hope that more talks are like yours.
Thank you.
Because I think it showed that you were part of the community. And I missed the end of it. So I'm hoping you talk about women in APIs, because
I did.
hellish technical difficulty.
No
but I think the women have been the standouts of this conference so far, speaking, which doesn't surprise me. We work harder to be in any room we're in, but I really appreciated that. I appreciated the personal touch and the mentorship and the plans. So I really hope that everyone's inspired by that talk. Can our next guest please